Right here at our New York studios, Paul Rykov is co-founder of American Veterans for Ukraine. Always good to see you, Paul. We will talk about Ukraine, but any thoughts on these drug boats, first of all, because we just heard about this, as Kelly says, another one somewhere in the Pacific. What goes through your mind when you hear about it, as Kelly says, just about every day now?
We are literally in uncharted waters, because where is Congress? Where is Congress? Where is the conversation with the American people? Where is congressional oversight over something that is careening toward what looks like could be a war, right? This is overt military strikes, no consultation with Congress, no conversation with Congress. Usually the president makes the case to Congress, makes the case to the American people, and then there's accompanying transparency, budgeting, hopefully some bipartisan unity. There's none of that here.
Or there might be a Pentagon press briefing, but they just put out the new press corps at the Pentagon. I was reading it right before I sat down, and it's like Lindell TV and Gateway Pundit.
This is a really, really important story I don't think most Americans are tracking on. Basically, the entire Pentagon press corps walked out last week.
Yes.
And now Hegseth and Trump are replacing them with the MyPillow TV guy, a bunch of YouTubers, and folks that are absolutely beyond the pale. There's no journalistic integrity. They just handpicked a bunch of not just right-wing, but far right-wing media outlets to replace Fox, to replace CNN, to replace Newsnation. And this is really important because those are the people asking questions about things like striking drug boats or when American soldiers die in combat. There is no precedent for this. They have totally consolidated what looks like a propaganda machine. I mean, Stalin, Putin are celebrating something like this. It's not what happens in America. When you're putting America's sons and daughters off into danger, there has to be some accountability, not just to the press, but to the American people.
Yeah, I don't know how much it resonates with the American people. I think it should. You know, obviously there's a bias being in the business, but I think it should. I think you're right. Let me go to Ukraine. On the map here on the tablet to bring it up, this Mark Rutte meeting is going to happen. And I don't know if they'll speak publicly, but we talked over and over. Where Trump seems to be is the Russian-controlled territory here. Let's hold the lines, right? I think that's where he is. You know, there's been some movement back and forth on where exactly the president stands. I think the NATO Secretary General might support that as well. But it's interesting that this meeting was put on the schedule late, and here he comes to Washington today.
I mean, hopefully it's good news, but I think we go back to a central point that you and I have been talking about for months. The idea that Ukraine can just give up huge swaths of its territory is outrageous to the Ukrainian people. I think sets a really bad precedent. It would give Putin what he wants. And we have to imagine, what if someone said to us, hey, just give up Alaska? I mean, this is their sovereign territory. It's considered part of Ukraine. Putin can claim it. But to give up a huge swath of their country is unacceptable to the Ukrainian people. And I don't think going to go over very well with NATO and others. But maybe there's a breakthrough here, especially on weaponry. We can send them Tomahawks. We can increase sanctions. There's a lot Trump can do to put more pressure on Putin, which is good for America.
I think the issue on Tomahawks is timing, right? Because, well, as far as we know from last week's meeting, the president took that off the table for now. But I've been talking to expert after expert on this. Like Kurt Volker was on about it. And the point that I keep hearing is like, give them the Tomahawks, or promise them the Tomahawks now to put the pressure on Putin. And you could always say to Zelensky, well, don't use these, or you're not going to use them if there's a ceasefire.
Yeah, I think more importantly, stop making Zelensky and Ukraine play this weird game of Mother May I. This goes back to Biden. He used to do the same thing with Abrams tanks and with Patriot missiles. Give them what they need at a minimum to defend their people. And, for example, a kindergarten that got hit this week, just yesterday, by Putin. They are striking civilian sites. The Ukrainians need whatever they can get to defend their homeland, to defend their civilians, to defend kindergartens, not even to use as offensive weapons, but to protect their homeland. That's what we would want, and that's what they should get to.
Couple things on New York City before you go. You're a New Yorker. You always want to talk about the city. On the tablet, we have the mayor's race, all three on stage for the final debate tonight, including Curtis Sliwa. We'll talk to Sid coming up about this radio conversation this morning, and there's a lot of pressure on Curtis to drop out. Doesn't look like he would. This particular poll had a closer race if he did. But I also think the Wall Street Journal had an interesting headline this morning about Zoran Mamdani, saying that he's promising a cheaper New York, but can he afford to pay for it? And they went through all of his policies. And the reason I think it's interesting is because, to me, that didn't come up enough in the last debate. You know, they were talking about Trump, and they're talking about Israel and Gaza and everything else. But what about this guy, Mamdani? And can he afford to pay for all the cheap and free stuff he wants to give the people of New York?
I think the big picture is, hey, America, welcome to New York's spectacular mess, right? What you've got here is three guys that are pretty unpopular across the board, especially with independents. Mamdani's got huge negatives. Cuomo is also deeply unpopular, and Sliwa's always been kind of a fringe guy. So now this is our spectacular
This is what we have.
This is what we have, but it's also reflective of the larger problem in America, because primaries are broken. Primaries should be open. This is what happens when you have primaries and that are run by billionaires billionaires and by parties and by unions. You get radical and unacceptable people. We need open primaries way further upstream so we can get more moderate, more centrist, more acceptable candidates. This is what happens when you let radical parties run our elections.
The last thing we saw, or I want to talk to you about, is what we saw on this show live yesterday, and it was here in New York. ICE has arrived. We know they've already been here, but it got a lot of attention. These ICE raids downtown, going after the street vendors, essentially, the guys selling the fake Rolexes on Canal Street, and then in come the protesters, and our Jessica Cartalia was in the middle of it. Here's some from Jessica.
Word got around that they were going to be making an arrest or raids, right? So everyone packed up all of the things that they were selling, all of the little kiosks along the street, and fled. As soon as people started to see this, that's when all of this started happening. All of these people are protesters. Again, anyone who's been taken into custody, we cannot confirm whether they were actually undocumented immigrants or protesters.
All right, and then things got even more heated, but, it is what it is, and that's what happened there. I think the question, the most balanced question is, even for people who agree with the president's immigration policy, the how and the way they're carrying it out. What do you make of it now?
Yeah, I think that's the most important question to ask. Is this good for America? Right? You can send ICE in, but should you send ICE into a New York City street in the middle of a day when you know this kind of response is going to happen? I feel like in this situation especially, Trump is poking the bear. He's sending them into a place where he knows there will be a response, he knows there will be protesters, and that's dangerous for ICE, that's dangerous for the protesters, and I think it's dangerous for the city. When you see these kinds of clashes, which will escalate if he continues to deploy ICE into New York City streets, our enemies are celebrating. And you have to find a better solution to cleaning up guys selling illegal pocketbooks than sending in ICE where they look like the Navy SEALs. I think it's way heavy-handed. I say that as a military guy. I think this is way over the top, and you're going to get a lot of that response, which is bad for everybody.
All right, Paul, always good to see you. Independent Americans podcast. We'll see you again next week, hopefully. Paul Rieckhoff at 10 past the hour.